Okay, I think this is working, but I'm going to double check because I don't know for sure. Oh yeah, it's working as fuck. Okay. Um. Oh wait, let me double check if my volume is working. Okay, yeah. Okay. This is my second AE tutorial, and in my first tutorial, I went over a handful of stuff, mostly really basic stuff like movement and really basic lighting, and that was pretty much it. And I think a little bit of manual camera movement, but um, not much else. So in this tutorial, I'm going to cover some other things. I actually wrote it down on a notepad. You know how kind of stupid it looks, but I'm going to cover some effects that I use, some lighting, cause I think my other one is just like a little bit outdated. It's not super outdated. I use a lot of the same techniques, but I just want to make another one cause the other one, poo poo. I'll touch some typography at the end if I have time, but I'll also cover transitions and just basic After Effects stuff like the graph editor. So this is my main composition, and I don't know what the fuck I'm saying actually. I'm gonna call this tutorial. I don't know if this is really like necessary to go over, but I started animating in 1280 by 720 just because it was like taking so long to render at 1920 by 1080. So all my videos have been dropped down uh like by quality. Um yeah, and it looks bad, but it's fine. Um I usually actually animate at 25 frames for some reason. I'm kind of like a sucker for the choppy look, but it also looks really ugly sometimes, so it's not like I'm saying you have to do whatever. Anyways, here's my timeline. I'm just going to fit it. Um, I guess I'll go over lighting first just so I can, I don't know, have a scene. So, I'm just gonna take like a really random pose. I've told people this before, but I resize everything to 800. There's no reason for it to be resized to 800, but I do it anyways because it's just like been Pavlov dogged into me since I started animating. I have a little maple background, so I'm just going to pick one. I make all of my backgrounds mostly in Fire Alpaca, which is the thing I use for making all my sprites and stuff. Um, but anyways, I'm going to find a room or an outside. I think I'd rather use a room. But I kind of wish I had like, I don't know, something a little cooler. I also just like realized I probably should have like figured this out before I started this. Anyways. Usually I'll animate this and then I'll pre-comp it. And then I'll size it again. So I'm just going to take this. I'm gonna put it somewhere. I think I want to put her over here. And what I like to do is I like to take some sort of sky. Oh my god. It's from Parked Out by the Lake. I think we can work with this. I like to take some sort of sky and slap it in windows. That's how I do that. And then I just add a Gaussian blur. And boom, you would never have known that that was from Parked Out by the Lake. Anyways, so there's a lot I can do with this scene. A lot of these objects are just attached to this background that I made, so I can't actually affect them individually. But if I were to, let's say, add an item in here, then I can show you how I can also affect that. So I'm going to, where are those? Here they are. See, those are so ugly, but it's okay. So I'm going to, the background is kind of like a sunset, but what I'd like to do, and I said this in my last tutorial as well, but I'm going to do this again. I add vignettes to all my layers if I can. I use CC, here I'll bring this up so it's more visible. Hello, why does it, okay, I'll just get, oh my gosh, don't look, this is so embarrassing. Oh, I might need that actually. Okay, I can pop it out actually. I don't want to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I added the vignette and it didn't really do anything because you have to fiddle around with the settings. What I like to do is I like to take the center point of it and I kind of locate it to where the light source is. And you can fiddle around with the amount and you can fiddle around with the direction of it, but just putting it in the general direction of where your light source is will allow you to add a nice shadow to wherever your character is standing. And it looks a bit whack because it looks really dark compared to the rest of it, but that will change later because we're going to add a lot more lighting on top of it. So hold on, give me a second. Give me a second. Okay. So I've added it to this character and I'm also going to add it to my foreground items. I like to always have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background if I'm doing a very, I guess, wide shot, just to add depth. So I'll do the same thing where I put it in that general area. For this scene, these would both be affected by the light, so I'm just going to do my best to add shadows. And personally, I don't really care if it gets too dark because I add a lot of light, or not usually a lot, but I add at least one lighten layer to unharshen the shadows. So I'm gonna take the kitchen and I'll add another vignette. Do the exact same thing. And yeah, I mean technically the light would get affected there actually, so I'll do that instead. Okay. I'm going to demonstrate how I do the floor shadows that I do sometimes when there's a light being casted from behind a character and it's projecting the shadow onto like the floor, let's say. Um, I do this in a really stupid way, I'm sorry. So I'm going to take my character, I'm going to control D to duplicate it, and then I'm going to press R, and I'm going to press this little cube box here, and it's going to turn it into a 3D object. And I'm going to, you can take your anchor point, I just pressed Y, and you can take your anchor point and you can either drag it down or you can do it another way, but I think it's easier this way. And I'm going to take the not the Y rotation, the X rotation, I'm gonna set it to 90. And now it's on the floor. If I wanted to move it more this way, so it's like going that way, I can just move the Z rotation and then that shadow moves. What I like to do for my shadows is I look up drop shadow. I attach it to the shadow layer and nothing really happened except for a drop shadow appeared for it, so I'm going to press shadow only and then it just shows the shadow. And if I soften it, then wow, it becomes a shadow. So cool. And then close that, and now I have a shadow. And the next thing I like to do is I like to add a solid. Sometimes I wing it and I pick a random color that I think will suit it. Or other times I take my color dropper and I just grab it from one of the outside resources that I used. So this would be an orange, so I'm gonna get the orange, but then I'm going to go in, I'm gonna adjust it just a little bit so it isn't so orange. And chances are I'm gonna adjust it a lot later, but it's fine just to get the basic the basic of it. On the left side here, there are blending modes here. If you don't see it, it's probably because you're in this mode, where you can use your 3D objects and all of this kablamo. But if you click this button here, toggle switches and modes, it switches and you have your blending modes. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna play around with it. The main blending modes I usually use are multiply, overlay, soft light, occasionally hard light, occasionally some of these, and I use add, lighten screen for the lighter areas. So I'm just gonna click on some. Firstly, I think this is way too orange. It's like really intense. If I use multiply, I would usually bring it down a bit, like that. And when I'm using a multiply layer, I usually like my colors to be a bit brighter. So that it's not as darkening and more just adding color to the scene. Whereas if I duplicate this and I set it to overlay, I like my overlay layers to be more desaturated because overlay layers bring in a lot of general contrast to the darks. So that's basically, yeah. So I have my two main, uh, not lights, but they kind of colorize the scene. And if I take it off, then it's pretty boring. But even with it on, it's still a little boring. So I'm going to take this window here and use it as this kind of light source area, so I'm gonna make another solid. I'm going to set it to some sort of orangey yellow because I can, again, I can change this, so it's pretty flexible. And just to avoid clipping the edges of solids, so if I make a square and I feather it out a lot, and then I scale it down, you can see, here I'll set this to add just so you can see it better. You can see the edge of the solid, and I do not want to see that when I'm making a solid because I think it looks ugly. So to avoid that, I just, before making my mask, I just scale this up. Doesn't really matter how big, just big enough so that if you do feather out your solid, it's not going to get in the way. And I like to lower the opacity just so I can still see my screen. There's a few ways I do this. You can mask it using the mask tool, or you can literally just make a square. And if you feather it, and I'll set it to add again, it already brings a lot of light into your scene. And it kind of counters the multiply layers. So even if your multiply layer is really dark and really intense, the add will bring the lights back in because multiply gets rid of a lot of the contrast in your scene. If I had to explain it, it makes it really muddy, but add seems to bring a lot of it back in. So I could stop here, and it doesn't look that bad, but I'm kind of an extra pickle, so I add a lot more stuff. So I'm gonna bring this up just a little bit because that's a little bit intense. And then what I like to do is I like to pre-comp my light layer. It's gonna get rid of the blending mode, but you just set it back. And then I like to take my mask tool, and I like to go, yeah, okay. I like to go along the seam of the window, and then I like to make that kind of that light illusion, you know? And you can play around with it, you can feather it out, and then it just kind of looks like it's seeping light through the windows instead of just a giant blob of light. And if you're double extra like me, you can duplicate it and scale it down and put it on top of the light that you just put there for an extra add layer. So without it, it is a nice light, but if you add the extra one on top, it just adds an extra oomph, which I like personally. So it looks nice, and then if I'm gonna be really extra, I'll take another solid and let me see if I can put some sort of light against this floor, because I think that's pretty, but I'm not sure if it'll work. So if I put this to add, what if I put this under? Oh, that's so pretty. Okay. And I can go in, press V to go back to your cursor, and I can just adjust this if it's, I'm gonna try to follow the edge sort of this, the window shape if I can. And I'm gonna feather it out just a little bit. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. Okay. Now that I've done that, so I have my light layers, I have my main color layers or whatever. Um, it has a lot of orange in it right now, but I like to add complementary colors to bring back a bit of depth, I guess. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna grab a darker blue. I'm gonna make it just a bit more this color actually. And what I like to do with this is I can just set it to lighten and put it on top and it'll soften out the, you know, those harsh blacks, but um, I actually like making, if I hold down and I select ellipse tool, I actually just like making a mask, and that's gonna mask everything in this section, but if I click inverted, then it masks everything that I didn't select. And if I feather that out, then it just has a nice little, you know. And if I don't like the color, I can go in and I can change it, turn the saturation up, make it lighter, the whole kabamo. You get it. Okay. There is a couple more steps that I do when I do my lighting. I will take my character, not that one, that's the shadow. I'll take my character layer, so this layer, and I'll go to layer, layer styles, and I'll add an inner shadow. I know that there's an inner glow option, but as far as flexibility goes, inner shadow is just a lot easier, I guess. Um, One second. Yeah, okay. So it added the inner shadow. I'm gonna drop it down, and right now it's set to black, it's set to multiply. So if I were to show you this, you can see it on my character, it's black. Um, and that's obviously not what I want, so I'm going to set it to color dodge. There's also screen, linear dodge, and lighter color, but I find color dodge ties a lot of the colors together. I'm gonna take my eyedropper tool and I'm just gonna literally steal one of these colors, and then I'm going to adjust the angle so that it's giving her a rim light. And it's looking a little bit horrific, so I'm going to move the distance back so that it's only hitting her edges. Um, the more I turn the opacity, the more saturated the colors get, and I'm just gonna try to find a middle ground. If you adjust the size, it kind of feathers out the edges, which I like to do just a little bit. And since these are pixels, I actually do like adding just a little bit of noise, not that much, just to bring a little bit more of that texture back. And yeah, I'm going to copy this inner shadow and I'm going to go to my foreground layer and I'm also going to add it to the foreground. And so that everything that is in the foreground, midground, is being affected by the light source. And I'm going to make this just a little less intense because it's not the main focal point. And yeah, pretty. So that's how I do lighting, basically. It's a grueling process, and it's only one step, so. Um, if you think that something is wrong with, let's say, the contrast of your scene, or the brightness in all, or just really anything, but you don't want to pre-compose all your layers, you can actually just click new and make an adjustment layer. And if your adjustment layer is on top of everything, it means that everything that you put on this adjustment layer is going to affect all the layers underneath it. So if I was on this scene and I said, oh, this scene is way too dark, I could go look up brightness and contrast. And if I add brightness to my adjustment layer, it also affects the scene I just worked on. And I can add contrast, and it goes from kind of like really nighttime to daytime. And so this is also how I adjust my scenes kind of in the compositing stages. And it's pretty easy. And if it's too saturated, I can add a saturation effect, lower the saturation, heighten the saturation. You get the gist. But yeah, so that's my scene. I'm just going to pre-compose it just to have a tidier timeline. Me personally, I write everything as just pre-comps. I don't change the names, and that's why I lead to getting confused. But if you're smarter than me, name your layers. So I'll call this tutorial lighting. Oh my god, if I can type. You always exported the video and changed it in Premiere Pro with all the other. Wow, that's really a lot of work. I'm really sorry for you. Okay, so we just did lighting. I'm going to go over maybe some transitions now that we have a scene. So I'm just gonna go over all the main ones that I use the most, I think. So I'm actually just going to cut this into a bunch of just gonna pretend these are two different scenes now. And if you don't know, pressing S on your keyboard brings up the scale button. Whoops. P is for position, R is for rotate, A is for anchor point. Oh, T is for opacity, etc. There's a lot of hotkeys. I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't know where it is. Anyways. So these are two scenes now. There are a lot of transitions that I use, and most of them I just literally pull out of my butt, but there are some that I have memorized, so yes, I'm gonna pre-compose this actually, just so I can have two actual different scenes. So, in a lot of my videos, I do a linear wipe. There's two ways to go about this transition, and I'll show you two ways to do it. So the first one is you literally grab a black or a white or whatever color you want for your linear wipe, and I'm just going to scale it up as much as I can so that I don't have to worry about it. And I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to create a rectangle about the size of my scene. And if I press F on my keyboard and I feather it out, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press P on my keyboard again, and I'm going to set a keyframe before the start of the new scene, one right where the new scene is, and one after the scene. And I'm going to leave this middle keyframe alone because that's what's going to transition my scenes. This one, it really doesn't matter which way you're doing your wipe because it's really up to you. But I'm just going to drag this. I'm sure there's an easier way to drag this, but I'm just gonna painstakingly drag mine off the screen. And now it'll go in and cover up the scene. And then on this side, I'm going to drag it in the opposite direction. Oh my gosh, don't be jealous. Your animations are awesome. Okay, so I'm going to, yep, and so if I press play, it covers it, just like that. And it's pretty seamless. If you're not looking too hard, it doesn't really, you can't really tell that there's maybe just a little bit of scene clipping there. And if you don't like the speed of it, you can always select your keyframes and click Control F9. Not Control, my bad, just F9. And then this is on easy ease, so it's kind of a little bit janky. But if you want your keyframes to ease into it and have the fastest point be in the middle where it actually transitions, select one of your keyframes and click this button and go to the graph editor. I'm going to explain the graph editor. I might as well explain it now because I'm getting into the nitty-gritties. There are different ways people use the graph editor. My way is probably not the 100% correct way, but it's the only way I know how to use it, so that's how I'm going to explain it. There's also a value graph, but I'm going to be so honest, I have no idea how to use this one. I remember back in 2017, I think, a lot of Instagram editors used value graph, and I had no idea how it worked because I only use speed graph. So that's what I'm gonna do. uh, so when you look at this thing that looks a bit like a butt, um, these yellow squares are your keys, your keyframes in your timeline. And these arcs are visualizing the speed of the movement that you put down. So since this is an easy ease, if I took this and I control clicked and I put it back to original keyframes and I selected it again, you can now see that all of my speeds are linear because they're not easy eased anymore. So it just goes straight across and ends abruptly. And this is kind of a oh my god, I can't speak. This is kind of a universal thing for a lot of programs where they use linears and smooth arcs and stuff. So you might already know this, but anyways. I'm gonna set this back to easy ease so it's nice and pretty. And if I want my transition in the middle, with the fastest being in the middle, I'm going to select this keyframe. And this little circle with a line, I can drag that. I can drag it this way, I can drag it this way. I'm gonna drag it this way, and I'm gonna keep it on this bottom line just to keep everything safe. And now the arc has changed. And now it's easing into this one. So this is now the highest point. You can't really see it. Oh, now you can see it. That's the highest point because everything else is below it. But the ease here is kind of still a bit janky, which means it would be the fastest here, but it would get fast here, slow a little bit, and then go back up, which I don't really want if I'm trying to ease something and make it look smooth. So I'm going to take this and I'm also going to drag it like that. And now it builds and builds and builds until it goes into the highest point. If that's too intense, you can bring it down a little bit so the arc is less intense, or if you want a bit of a dip in there and not as fast in the middle, you can also drag this. But that's how you ease things, and then you can do the exact same with the opposite side. I'll actually show you what it looks like when you do that. So now if I press play, it's really, really fast. So it goes in really, really fast. It almost, if you blink, you miss it. Like, it's really fast. If I take this, I lessen the arc, take this, lessen the arc, it will still be fast, but it'll be less fast. And it kind of has that section in the middle where it doesn't completely zoom by. It kind of stops in the middle, has this dip, and then continues on. I prefer that a lot to the extremes, just because I think the extremes are a little too fast sometimes. But if I were to do this, it's nice, but I'm gonna be honest, I really like the linears for these transition because it just is prettier and it looks more like a transition. Anyways, so that's the first way you can do those linear transitions. The second one is if you look up a linear wipe. I used to do this a lot more. I don't really do it anymore. But you would use the effect. So, oh, sorry, I just realized I'm really zoomed out. I'm sorry. So this one utilizes this effect. It just automatically wipes your screen for you. You don't have to worry about any of the masking shit. So if I'm gonna, yeah, okay, so I'll click this, make a keyframe. And if I double click this, it'll bring up the actual key so you can see it. And if I go, I'm gonna go one keyframe ahead just so I can see. And I'm going to zoom it as much as I want. And then I'll just move it one over. And then it does that. And then you're left with this. A scene with nothing on it. So I'm gonna add a linear wipe to this one as well. And I'm going to change this to -90. And if I put it to 100, and then I go forwards and I set it back to 0, now it's wiping, but instead of having a solid wiping against it, it's wiping the actual scenes itself. It's really blunt, so you can feather it. I'll set this to Woo! That was scary. I'll set it to 200, maybe. I'll set this to 200, and then it just, oh, it's lagging so bad. Then it wipes. The difference with this one is that if you're going to do this one, you have to be wary about the solid that you have underneath, or whatever you have underneath. So if I add a solid underneath, I'll make it red, just to really show you. It's going to wipe the red underneath because it's not wiping a solid across the screen, it's wiping the transparency of it getting wiped out, if that makes sense. So no matter what is underneath, it'll show underneath that feather. You can also take these into the graph editor and adjust them like I showed earlier, but you don't have to. And it'll work the exact same, you'll just have to adjust them individually, not in the same set of keyframes. So those are the two ways I do linear transitions. That works for a handful of things, and yeah. So I'm gonna delete this just so I have a clean canvas again, and I'll show another transition that I like to use. So this transition, I use masks. So I'm going to take a mask of this, and I'm going to select the mask, and I'm gonna hold down Control and double click this button. And it makes sure that the anchor point is centered. And then okay, I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. I just wing it and pretend it's centered. So if you want to figure out how to actually center the masks, wait, can I do this? No. I don't know. Anyways, I just wing it. If I press F, it brings up my mask stuff. And I'm going to work mainly with feather and expansion. So expansion expands the mask back to its original shape. And the feather feathers out the shape. And what I like to do is I take my mask and I set it all the way down so that you can't see it. I click the transition button, or I mean the keyframe button, and I go before that one, and I go all the way up like this. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm doing this in the incorrect order actually. Let me restart. My bad. I'm going to take I'm going to turn stroke off. I'm going to take a circle. I'm going to hold shift and make a circle. I'm going to control double tap this and align that into the center. Trust me guys, this transition is a banger. And oh my gosh. Then I'm going to add a blur. You can also just make a solid and mask it as a circle. I don't know really why I did it this way, but anyways. I'm going to scale it up at this middle point, and I'm going to set this to 0. So now I have a circle. Maybe it's a little bit too fast. Now I have a circle. Get in your face. And I'm going to take my second clip, put it in on top. And this is when that second bit comes on, where I make the circle, press F, feather that out, bring down my menu, and then expand that. And I like this transition. I think it's cute. You can mess around with the settings. You can mess around with the timing of it so it goes more kind of like a transition instead of before. So yeah, I think that sounds cute. I use it occasionally when I'm a little, what's it called? Frisky. Anyways, I am going to do, I don't know if like, no, people already know how to do that one. I can do, let me pull up my notes. I'll do really basic transitions. I also like to do this one a lot. I just take a Gaussian blur and I blur out my scene. I can't see the border, but just ignore that. I feel like most of my transitions are just really simple. I just use a lot of them, and that's why it looks kind of cool. I'll do some effect stuff now. What I like to do a lot of the time is I'll write it down for you guys. I use directional blur. I use TV effect or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how I do a custom transition for a lot of my videos. I use this a lot in Goddish. I use it a lot in what's it called? Delusion Girl. And it's just a really easy way to make kind of glitchy transitions without having to download overlays. Because I'm lazy and I don't know how to do that. So what I do is I take my first clip, here, I'll color code them so it's less confusing. I'll make that one purple, and I'll make this one, where is it? Where is it? Cyan. Okay. So I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna cut it, Control Shift D, and then I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna Control Shift D. So these will be my two main keys. They're just one frame, whatever. And I'm gonna look up TV. And it has these three ones. I can't really remember which one I use. I think I use weak. But they're all customizable, so it don't really matter. I usually get rid of noise. I usually get rid of color balance. Because I just want to mainly focus on the wave warp. If I set it to some crazy ones, it changes the look of the wave warp, you know. Smooth noise, smooth. Noise, not smooth. And you can adjust the settings, but basically, yeah. And now it has one frame, being a little crazy. I'm actually gonna zoom these in so you don't see those gross edges. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this one. What do the other ones do actually? Let's try old. Yeah, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Let's try noise. Oh yeah, that looks cool. I think it's the Venetian blinds doing that. Yeah. I'm going to put a black solid underneath so it doesn't look like it's smoky. Yeah. That looks cool. And then sometimes I add a couple extra frames just to add another one, but this time, oh, it's really intense. But this time I'm not going for really insane, I'm just going for a bit of a wave. So that could be using smooth noise, just stuff that isn't this one, because this one is really in your face. So I'm gonna use smooth noise, and then it gives a little bit, a lot, oops, a lot, and then I'm gonna add the same thing to this one. Maybe there's an easier way to do this using overlays, but that's how I do it. So now when I press play, it has this kind of seamless transition, honestly, but since we eased into it with more and more effects, it looks quite natural. And this is how I do those glitchy effects, and I think it's nice. And I also, if I put these back to normal, use directional blur. So if I do the same thing, and I cut some, and I add a, oh good night Alyssa, and I add some directional blur, and I set this to, let's say 90, because I want it to be sideways, and I add a lot of it, I can copy this over, paste it onto that, and yeah. Sometimes I opt to do this rather than setting keys because it's just easier in my opinion. Setting keys is like really annoying for some reason, so I don't do it sometimes because I'm lazy. But you know, sometimes it's fine to be lazy because, let's be honest, it gives the exact same result. So who cares? Yeah. When it comes to text, I'm going to write text. And I will set it to a simple, yeah, maybe I'll set it red just so everyone can see. So I have a text. I like to play around with text a lot. Maybe not a lot in my videos, because I feel like I don't really do it a lot. But I used to do it a lot when I did like editing. Um, Ew, I don't like that. Let me find a different. Ooh, that's so ugly. Okay, it's fine. It's just a test. Here, maybe if I put it in full caps, it'll look, yeah, okay, that looks fine. Okay, so there's actually a lot of things you can do with layer styles, and I think it's fun. Oh, my headphones are dying. If my headphones die mid-tutorial, I'm sorry. Um, so if you add an inner shadow, it gives this cool pop-out look. Um, and you can adjust it. Maybe I'll make the size a bit more. Maybe I'll soften it a little bit so that's not as intense. If I... Uh-oh. What does this one do again? Oh, that's cool. Add some color. Wow. It's like I'm learning with you guys. And I also like adding specifically a stroke. And where is it? There it is. I just think strokes are really pretty, and I think they make things look nice. So I'm gonna take maybe like a blue just because it's nice. And I can adjust the size, blah 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 blah. I know that you could, what was this? Ooh. Ooh. I know that you could add more layer styles on top of the stroke, but I don't really remember. I can try though. No, I don't really know. Anyways, I think if you pre-conf it and add more, but it's a cool way to do text and add a little bit more pizzazz to it than just your regular text. Let's get rid of all those layer styles though, because I don't really care. I would go into the, ooh, that's gross. I would go into like the nitty gritties of typography, but I don't really have time. But I'll do a really simple one. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna duplicate for every letter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to mask each letter. This is probably one of my most used things that I do when it comes to text, because I don't really mess around with text a lot, but yeah. I'm gonna position all these, oh, if it would open, and I can just select them all and add a keyframe. And I'm gonna set another keyframe, and on this first keyframe, I'm going to press P. Oh, I was already on P. And I'm going to have a drop down, just like that. I'll bring it out more. And I'm going to take all these keyframes and I'm going to easy ease them. I'll go back to my graph editor, just like I was talking about, and I'm going to move all, fuck, how do I select them all? Yeah. Yes? Yep. And sometimes I only use this one because I kind of like the hesitation at the start. Oh, I did not look at chat, I'm sorry. I have an Instagram for my art account and I have a personal Instagram, but I don't have any Instagram for Maple or editing or any of that stuff. But if you want to follow my art account, I'll write it down. It's at hometown art underscore. And I'll leave that on screen for like a little second. Okay. So now they're all falling at a nicer speed. And I can actually cut that and get rid of these because I don't really care about those. And then, what's fun about this part is I can offset all of these. You can do one key or one frame, you can do more frames. Wow, now they all come down. And if I add a directional blur and I go like this, and then I set it to 0 once it drops. Oh, that's not where it drops. And I set it to 0 where it drops. I can take this directional blur, copy it onto all these other ones, and now it's dropping with motion blur. You can also use this button here, but it lags my computer out a lot, so I don't use it. And now, if you take this, pre-comp it, set it to dancing dissolve, it looks so cool. And this is what I use for a lot of my videos, just because it's fun and it looks cool. And you can set this to a bunch of different stuff. You can set the overlay, and then it has this nice overlay effect. You set it to add, and then it's bright. Set it to multiply, and it'll darken, but you can't see it because it's white. Set the difference, and it inverts, etc. I just like playing around. Oh, these stencil things at the bottom are also really cool because if you have something that is a solid color, black or white, then you can actually put your scene inside whatever that is, as long as it's over top of your scene. So stencil alpha puts it inside. I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, it's just okay. Wait. So if I switch these, I put this to stencil alpha. Nope, I'm just stupid. Never mind. But realistically, if there was something there, it would work. But I don't know how to explain it. Anyways. My headphones are looking gonna die, so I don't know how much longer I can stream for. But that basically covered a lot of the stuff I do. I might make another tutorial if I think of other stuff. But that was my lighting, text, effects, transitions tutorial. Because I didn't feel like sleeping. So that's all I got. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. I feel like I can't really explain certain things because people already know how to do it, and it would just be a lot of mumbo jumbo and repetition. But yeah, it's a lot of the things I use, at least nowadays, and it's pretty fun. So yeah, thanks for watching. And thank you to CLA Story for being in this stream for so long and talking in chat. I'm gonna end stream now, but your Maple Story. Maple Story.